During the trial of YNW Melly, you could have cut the tension in the air with a knife. With Melly potentially facing the death penalty, the jury had to decide if Melly killed both of his friends, and the reasons given for why Melly killed two of his friends are truly chilling. Motive and background. For YNW fans, the sequence of events on October 26, 2018 were difficult to stomach. The first piece of news to come out was that YNW Juvie and YNW Sack Chaser were shot multiple times. They were later driven to Memorial Miramar Hospital, where they were pronounced dead. Juvie was just 19 years of age, whereas Sack Chaser was 21. And with the success of Melly's song Murder on My Mind, the YNW crew were destined for great things. As the news broke, Melly posted on social media, "They took my brothers from me over jealousy. I know y'all watching over me, it's #YNW4L, and after, they want to see me break down and stop or in jail or a box, but my still need me. They parents need me. They family need me till we meet again, my slimes." Gradually, more and more information came out about these killings. The Sun Sentinel reported, "Before sunrise on October 26th, a Jeep Compass with the rear window punched out delivered mortally wounded Anthony Dondre Williams and Christopher Thomas, Jr. to the emergency bay of Memorial Hospital Miramar. Doctors declared them dead. Henry YNW Bortland was the driver of the Jeep, and the only passengers were the dying men. Demons YNW Melly was not at the hospital that early morning, according to police. YNW Bortland claimed that it was a drive-by, and when police investigated the incident, they came to a different conclusion. They believed that there was no drive-by, but instead, the killings came from inside the car. In February 2019, YNW Melly and YNW Bortland were charged with the murder of their two friends. It was a truly insane twist in the tale.
And two men are in jail this morning, including an up-and-coming Florida rapper. Both men are charged in a double murder. Police are saying the two staged a crime scene to make it look like a drive-by shooting.
The allegations were so incredible that it led many people to pause for a minute and wonder why. Why would you choose to kill two of your best friends? And on top of that, why would you do something that will only end up risking the amazing new life that both Bortland and Melly had? Melly's defense lawyers in the trial said that there was no motive for these murders. Nothing could possibly drive Melly towards killing two of his best friends, whose names he had tattooed on his face. But the prosecution gave some reasons why, and you can make your own mind. Christine Bradley was the prosecuting attorney for the YNW Melly trial. She pointed out the imbalance of power within the YNW group.
They were buddies since they grew up. But look at the stress being placed on this defendant as the only one bringing the money in, as the only person who was paying the bills.
So Melly did not kill two of his friends because he was sick and tired of paying the bills, but it did cause tension within the group, and tension was on the rise. With Melly's career approaching stardom, there were a lot of deals coming their way. The group had plans to sell the YNW brand for marketing and licensing for $500K. Given that Melly was clearly the star and the one that brought in all of the money, you would think that most of the money would go to Melly, but this was not the case. YNW Juvie was going to receive $100K, and Sack Chaser was expecting $200K, so the remaining $200K, or 40% of the deal, was going to go to Melly. And this allegation is not something that was simply hearsay online. It was an argument brought forward by the father of Juvie.
From the day one, I believe that Melly was responsible for my son's death on October 26th.
Juvie's father even had the chance to FaceTime Melly and Bortland. He did not get the reaction he anticipated.
His explanation, when I finally talked to him and Cortland on a FaceTime, their response and how they was reacting, they showed no remorse. They didn't act like they was grieving, like they lost a best friend or nothing. They was, in my opinion, they was in the best spirits.
And then Juvie's father drops a bit of a bombshell. Melly's defense lawyers argue that Melly would never kill two of his close friends. But if Melly was so close with Juvie, why did he not go to his funeral? And this probably prompted Juvie's dad to speak out in the media. Melly not attending the funeral is a big red flag. However, Melly did attend some of Sack Chaser's funerals. But the aunt of this victim was not happy with Melly's presence, though.
He didn't come to the funeral. He came after, like, when we was sitting down eating. Came in dancing, happy dancing. Didn't show his respects to nobody. I remember that day.
$500K seems to be quite a low figure, or more precisely, $300K he is missing out on in this deal. Most people wouldn't kill for any money, but given Melly's net worth of about $5 million, fighting over $300K seems to be a measly sum of money. In fact, it was a much bigger figure that was mentioned in the trial. $16 million was coming into Melly's manager 100K track, and this was meant to be split 4 ways to Melly, Sack Chaser, Juvie, and Bortland. The chilling reason argued is that Melly and Bortland could nab an extra $4 million million each if they took Juvie and Sack Chaser out of the picture. And this does not need to be the sole reason why, but could be part of the why he did it. Instead of there being one straightforward reason why he did this, the prosecution argued that there were many reasons. The second possible reason is that these killings were gang-related. To prove a motive for this murder, the prosecution attempted to establish that Melly was a member of the G-Shine Bloods. Bradley showed multiple images of Melly making signs associated with this particular group, which begs the question, why would he make these signs if he wasn't a member of this group? To prove Melly's membership of the Bloods, the prosecution brought Detective Danny Polo to stand, who wore a ski mask to cover his identity. According to Polo, if you throw gang signs without being a member, you will quickly get checked. Polo referenced the Island Boys, a hip-hop group who learned the hard way on why you should never use signs for gangs which you are not a member.
And they quickly got checked by almost every Blood that could find them on social media. Then had to recant and apologize.
So in Polo's eyes, Melly is either an official gang member or an incredibly brave man. There are other theories circulating about tension within the group. Sack Chaser was the person who started the YNW crew and saw himself as the CEO of the group. And he saw himself as the person who could bring Melly onto even greater heights. This seems to have caused tension with Melly's mom, who sees herself as the person who brought Melly's talents to light. A video surfaced of Melly's mom speaking about how Sack Chaser had been threatening people.
Show me text messages from Sack Chaser threatening all her friends and all these people like he's about this life. But I'm saying, like, who the f you ever robbed? Who the f you ever shot at? What the f you ever did? You couldn't even take a f***ing weed charge.
Then Melly's mom sends out a warning.
If you don't sit your ass down and don't ever come for me, because my credentials is real. It ain't even a joke. So don't ever try to come for me.
And then she explains that Melly's success was because of her and not because of him.
Melly is my child. And he is gonna be great because he's talented. He's talented because his mom, not because of your little ass, rich ass.
However, this theory only presents an explanation as to why Sack Chaser was killed and not Juvie. If Juvie was innocent of everything, why was he included in the alleged killing? All of these questions at some stage entered the minds of the investigators. The motive did not make sense, but the story given by Melly and Bortland did not make sense either. While all of these explanations may seem a bit muddied, the prosecution boiled it down to three central reasons why he killed his two friends. The first comes from a place of anger, alluding to the arguments between Sack Chaser and Melly's mom. The second refers to the $16 million which was supposed to be split 4 ways. And lastly, there was the resentment that Melly was bringing in all of the money. So let's take a trip back to October 26th, 2018, on the night in question. It was a night that should be difficult to forget. However, the people involved and associated have varying accounts, and their recollections do not add up to evidence found by the police. Reconstruction. The initial story of what happened came from YNW Bortland. The YNW crew was working at the studio late one night and only called it a night at 3:20 a.m. Surveillance footage emerged from this night and 2 cars were parked outside the studio, a gray Compass Jeep and a red Mitsubishi. Inside the Jeep were Melly, Bortland, Juvie, and Sack Chaser, and once Bortland steps his foot on the gas, his life would change forever. The studio was in Fort Lauderdale and the crew were on their way back to a rented house in Miramar, where seemingly all of them were living. The first few minutes were fairly uneventful, with many passengers trying to get some sleep. The Jeep was driving slowly behind the Mitsubishi. At some point in the journey, Melly switched cars. There is no reason given as to why he changed cars, but this is the reason given by one of the YNW Melly crew. The police interviewed a member named YNW Taliban after the shooting, who was in the red Mitsubishi when this happened. He first told the police that Melly rode home with him in the Mitsubishi. It was only when they showed him the surveillance footage of Melly getting into the Jeep that these details changed. On an affidavit from the police, it read, after confronting Withers with the video evidence, he, Withers, then changed his story. Withers added Demons was in the gray Jeep initially, but along the way he got out of the Jeep and entered his red Mitsubishi. Withers stated this occurred on I-75 near the Sheridan Street exit. Withers stated he was contacted by Demons via Snapchat to pull over on I-75 and meet up. Jacoby Mills was also in the Mitsubishi during the trip, and this is where it gets even more convoluted. He said that the Jeep was driving behind the red Mitsubishi at the beginning of the journey, up until they reached the I-75 onto Miramar Parkway. There was a McDonald's along this point, so he assumed that they had stopped for food. Jacoby and YNW Taliban gave statements to the police. However, something which carries more weight than police statements is testimony. When someone gets up on the stand, the consequences of them lying are a lot worse. During the Melly trial, producer Trevion Glass was called to the witness stand. He did not bring much information on whether Melly switched cars, as he was asleep for the entire journey. His testimony will become a lot more interesting later on. It was Adrian Davis who testified right at the end of the trial, who would shed some light on the case.
Did there come a time that you were woken up before you got to the house?
Yes.
What happened?
We pulled over, and that's when Melly got in the car with us.
This was bombshell testimony and could be what saved Melly from the guilty verdict. Here was a person testifying under oath that Melly was not at the scene of the crime. And Davis has a skin in the game in two ways. Sure, he is one of Melly's friends and could be covering for him, but at the same time, he was also close friends with Juvie and Sack Chaser. The fact that Melly was apparently not inside the vehicle when these shootings happened will become very important later, as further evidence suggests otherwise. According to Bortland, they drove along on the I-595 to I-75 and exited at Miramar Parkway heading west. And it was just off the exit at SW 160th Avenue, Dykes Ard, when somebody opened fire. A drive-by occurred and Bortland was able to duck for cover, but when he emerged, he realized that his two friends, Juvie and Sack Chaser, had been shot dead. When the police looked into the evidence, they came to the conclusion that Bortland took a different route. The police obtained a warrant to search the phone records. They found that their phone locations did not match with where they said they were on the day of the shooting. Instead of driving along the freeway, they traveled further out toward the Everglades along Pembroke Ard. And another interesting revelation is that Melly's phone seemed to be in the same place as Bortland's, even after he allegedly switched cars. Phone records are not always accurate, but as the investigation unfolded, more evidence came forth which supported these claims. On Pembroke Road, the police found pieces of glass, and this glass matched the shards that went missing from the Jeep Compass. They also found gun shell casings, which were a perfect match for the bullets found inside Juvie and Sack Chaser. Curiously, no evidence was found along the road where Melly and Bortland claimed that the shooting took place. The shattered glass you would expect from a drive-by was nowhere to be found. The affidavit for Melly's arrest said, after a long and exhausting examination, no evidence was found. The detectives and officers walked the 12 blocks on foot. It should be noted, not a single report of gunshots was reported to the Broward County Communications Center, nor Miami-Dade as well. This is an important piece of evidence, or lack of it. The prosecution highlighted this in the trial. The detectives from Miramar shut down the entire length of Miramar Parkway from 160th to 172nd. They walked side by side for an hour, that mile-long stretch, looking for evidence of this drive-by. In this case, the lack of evidence is very important. There is a lack of any evidence whatsoever to support that a drive-by happened on Miramar Parkway. Additionally, there was also some video evidence from businesses who had CCTV cameras. Video evidence shows the gray Compass Jeep traveled west in the 19200 block and returned eastbound at 406 HRS. Cell site data from Demon's cell phone data corresponded with the actual crime scene location. Melly didn't make things easy for himself either. A few months after the shooting, Melly released a documentary about himself and the YNW crew. But right at the end of the film, the screen contains the words. 4 days after the completion of this film, YNW Melly and his friends were the targets of a drive-by shooting in Miami, Florida. Why did it say Melly and his friends? Melly was supposedly in a different car when this happened, and this is where things get very complicated. Bortland claims that the drive-by came from the right side of the vehicle where Juvie and Sack Chaser were seated. The autopsy report said, evidence from the autopsy revealed that both victims' wound paths to their heads were from a left to right direction. This directly contradicts the statements made by Henry and does not support the statements of a drive-by shooting that occurred on the right side of the vehicle. So bullets came from the right side of the vehicle. But according to Bortland, the only person on the right side of the car at this stage was Bortland. Eventually, Bortland arrives at the hospital, and there is CCTV footage to back this up. However, something didn't add up. Bortland did not reach the hospital until 4:35 a.m. The autopsy claimed that there was a period of time between them being shot and brought to the hospital. Bortland didn't immediately bring his friends to A&E as you would expect. The police reported, evidence shows that Henry and Demons drove around for a period of time with the two dead victims in their vehicle prior to entering the hospital. This was a calculated effort to establish their version of the incident in an attempt to deceive law enforcement. When they arrived at the A&E, the car contained 3 people at this time: Bortland, Juvie, and Sack Chaser. The latter two were pronounced dead right at the scene. Melly was apparently dropped off. Back at the house, the people who traveled home in the red Mitsubishi found out about the shootings and the supposed drive-by. Jacoby Mills, if you can recall, thinks that Melly never switched cars and was in the Jeep at the time. And according to Mills, the crew who were back at the house then traveled to Fredo Bang's house, where Melly and Bortland currently were. When Jacoby arrived at Fredo Bang's house, he noticed that Melly was wearing different clothes. Travion has confirmed that Melly was indeed wearing different clothes.
Was Melly wearing the same clothes or different clothes than when you saw him at the studio?
It was a new day. Nah, he wasn't.
Nah, he wasn't. You guys
Wasn't wearing the same clothes.
Jacoby claims that afterward, he, Melly, Bortland, and Melly's manager went out to a wooded area where Bortland had hidden some guns. One of these guns was covered in blood, and Melly's manager told them that he would get rid of it. Presumably, Melly and Bortland dispute these claims. Fredo Bangs would have been a key witness to this trial but has refused to cooperate with the police. At the same time, the police made a big mistake in searching Fredo Bangs' house afterward, as it was another important place connected to the crime: evidence and defense. As I mentioned earlier, Melly did not do himself any favors when it came to investigating this case. There are text messages from Melly's phone that do not paint him in a good light, nor do they represent the actions of an innocent man. 2 months before the murder, he texted his mom, "Get me a Glock ASAP," and "Like go now, I just don't want no illegal gun." And there are some suspicious aspects of Melly's texts that shed further light on his gang affiliations. Melly is alleged to be a member of the Bloods, whose mortal enemy are the Crips. For this reason, it is quite common for Bloods members to regularly omit the letter C in regular words and replace it with B. Danny Polo looked at Melly's phone and said that he often substitutes the letter C with the letters B, K, or X in messages, which can be an indicator of affiliation with the group. In December 2018, Melly was also in regular communication with a guy called Gino, a G-Shine member. One message from Gino said, "I want you to really think about the power you possess, lil brother. I'm just here to show you how to use it." Gino also uses slang terms like Ascari and Don, which are associated with the G-Shine Bloods. And in December that year, one text gives the impression that Melly was being recruited by the Bloods. Gino wrote, "Once the family get a real glimpse of how you rock with me, it's all access granted, be like a young Nicky Scarfo." A week later, Gino wrote, "I'm here to help you, but I refuse to not be helped back. In all actuality, you don't f with me or the set. I'm beefing with in Florida. I don't even know SMH. Why are you even around?" There's also some evidence that Melly and his team paid off a potential witness. During the time of the crime, Melly was dating a woman named Mariah Hamilton, and he FaceTimed her that night. During an argument, he also sent her a Snapchat message where he talks about the amazing favor Bortland has done for them. "I keep Bortland with cuz at the end of the day, he did one of the realest in my life. This and saved my life. He coming everywhere with me. Cause if them crackers come grab him, it's my fault, you forgot?" For some strange reason, Hamilton's mother received a lot of money from Melly's manager, 100K Track, and she has some quite damning messages on Instagram. The promises that were made to us by YNW for me to quit my job and they would take care of us were all lies. They didn't want us talking with prosecutors, but now they have all disappeared. I quit my job based on what Track and his wife or company said. Now look, we can't go home. We spending all my money I worked for and they taking trips and enjoying life. If you think I was a beast before, wait until this trial. I'm not holding anything back. They can call me Mim Snitch. The location of Melly throughout the night was up for debate. However, after the shooting, Melly sent a drop pin to Fredo Bangs, whose real name is Frederick Givens, in the hopes that he would come pick him up. The prosecution said, "What you're also going to find out is that while Mr. Demons is out on the road at 4 in the morning, he sends a drop pin to his current location to one of his friends, Frederick Givens. Frederick Givens is also involved in the music industry, and Melly asked to be picked up. As for Fredo Bangs, we will never get to hear his thoughts on what happened. During the trial, he did not agree to testify, even though the state of Florida granted him immunity from prosecution. In an interview with Vlad TV, Bangs said, "They probably going to keep bothering me because at the end of the day, it's still active, it's still in trial. So they want to push and squeeze anybody they can who they think got something going on or think could be involved to where they can get some information. Being that we friends, I expect them to bother me. But there is one text message which the prosecution holds crucial evidence. In fact, they believe it is Melly confessing to the murders, and this message sent by Melly is quite damning and incredibly difficult for the defense to explain away. When news got out that Juvie and Sack Chaser had been shot, a lot of friends reached out to Melly to see if he was okay. He responded to one of his friends with,
I did that.
However, the defense spotted something unusual about this text. They examined other texts from Melly. Melly's lawyer said, "These phone messages that the state introduced, pages that we painfully went through, he spells it diat, not T-H-A-T. What a strange thing." The defense retorted that Melly sometimes spells that with ats too, and even has a song named Slang That Iron, where he spells that in the same way as the text message. And the technology used these days means that staging a drive-by is incredibly difficult. The science of ballistics means that experts can look at bullets and bullet wounds and conclude the distance and direction of where these bullets came from. Ballistics tests for the investigation found that the bullets came from inside the Jeep. By now, you're probably wondering, if this was a drive-by, then surely there would be shots along the side of the vehicle. And the Jeep did indeed have bullets along the side. However, when experts looked into the damage on the side of the vehicle, they noticed that the bullets were not shot by someone in a moving vehicle, but someone completely still.
All but one is done at a stationary position. The shooter is at a stationary position when all but one of these rounds are going in.
While all of this information would point towards the fact that this was a cover-up, it is not an open and shut case that Melly and Bortlen did these killings. In fact, there is some very compelling evidence that supports Melly and Bortlen's innocence. Objects in the Jeep such as Gucci slides, a shell casing, bloodstains on clothes, and a pair of Jordans were tested. They could not find any evidence of Melly's DNA from inside the Jeep. The only DNA the prosecution had supporting their case was on the door handle. Tests say that it could have been Melly's. However, this DNA test was suspiciously done only a few days before the trial, and it almost looked as if the state was trying to invent evidence when they couldn't find it. As well as DNA, the investigation looked into evidence of gun residue. After firing a gun, there should be bits of residue on your hands and possibly your face after the shooting. Interestingly, no gunpowder residue was found on Melly, and they could not locate a gun. We have a rather confusing situation where gunshot residue was found inside the car, but not on Melly. The defense also presented some compelling arguments in Melly's favor. One of their biggest arguments is that a lot of the information from Melly's phone is a little complicated. The YNW crew had communal phones and regularly changed them, which cast doubts over the texts, but particularly cast doubt on the cell phone location. Ultimately, Melly's lawyer's biggest defense was that the state had years to investigate, but still haven't come up with a conclusive and definitive explanation as to why Melly killed two of his friends. During the entire trial, a lot of the information seemed to be muddied, and just when anything conclusive came to light, there would be other evidence that contradicts it. And this is why the jury finally came to their conclusion.
Today, the judge in the YNW Melly double murder case declared a mistrial after the jury wasn't able to reach a unanimous decision.
Melly's lawyer said,
"Prosecutors are given great power, endless resources to perform their mission of pursuing justice. But that's not what occurred here."
And goes on to say how poorly investigated this case was.
What they will bring you is a case that is riddled with reasonable doubt, that is founded on an incompetent and incomplete investigation, and the exercise of poor judgment at every turn.
The result may have been a mistrial. However, it's important to note that the jury were not simply asked whether Melly did it or not. They were asked if they thought Melly did not beyond any reasonable doubt. So if they were in two minds, they had to go with not guilty. For the next trial, the horrifying consequences for Melly are still on the table. He could spend decades behind bars and even face the death penalty. And in Florida, they recently changed the rules to receive the death penalty. You don't need every member of the jury to find you guilty. Only 8 of the 12 jurors need to find you guilty. Melly is in the same limbo he found himself in February 2019. And the following trial is sure to bring even more drama. Thank you for watching. Click on the videos you see in front of you.